The president and
nicely done.
The president and his lies, and they are so incredible. They are just so overwhelming, the amount of lies that he has, that we don't believe we can fit them all in. And these are just the highlights. We don't believe we can fit them in a 2-hour period.
No, there's no way.
We're doing this in chunks tonight, so you can have it and give it to your friends tonight at 5:00.
We were just talking about the fact that they said they were going to cover everybody, and that nobody. If you wanted to keep your doctor, you can. If you like your healthcare plan and you want to keep it, you can.
Right.
Well, now the CBO was it last week, came out with their estimate. 7 million people will lose their doctors.
And their health care insurance. California, new estimate out now. California is saying your insurance in California is going to go up 150%. He said it's going to make it cheaper. It's now more expensive. They say it wasn't a tax. Then they argued to the Supreme Court that it was a tax. From the very beginning, his plan was to transition to a universal health care system.
This is a $2 trillion part of our economy. And it is my belief that not just politically, but also economically, it's better for us to start getting a system in place, a universal health care system, signed into law by the end of my first term as president, and build off that system to make it more rational. By the way, Canada did not start off immediately with a single-payer system. They had a similar transition step.
It's a transitional system building on the existing systems that we have.
Transitional to what?
Well, transitional, hopefully, because the system currently is such a patchwork of inefficiency that over time, I would want to see Medicaid, Medicare, the Children's Health Insurance Program, SCHIP, all those integrated more effectively.
Let's say that I proposed a plan that moved to a single-payer system. Let's say Medicare Plus. Essentially, everybody can buy into Medicare, for example. Transitioning a system is a very difficult and costly and lengthy enterprise. It's not like you can turn on a switch and you go from one system to another. So it's possible that up front you would need not just, you might need an additional $90 or $100 billion a year.
Wow. Whew. And we know all of these. How many people in the country have never heard these before? So as the architect of the president's healthcare system, Jacob Hacker, he said...
Someone once said to me, this is a Trojan horse for single payer. And I said, well, it's not a Trojan horse, right? It's just right there. I'm telling you, we're going to get there.
So it was necessary because, of course, there were doctors doing unspeakable things. That was why all of this was necessary. Unspeakable horrors for the sake of money.
If a family care physician works with his or her patient to help them lose weight, modify diet, monitors whether they're taking their medications in a timely fashion, they might get reimbursed a pittance. But if that same diabetic ends up getting their foot amputated, that's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 immediately. The surgeon is reimbursed. And you come in and you've got a bad sore throat. Or your child has a bad sore throat or has repeated sore throats. The doctor may look at the reimbursement system and say to himself, you know what? I make a lot more money if I take this kid's tonsils out.
What's amazing is they talked about doctors that would cut people's feet off for money. And yet, no one seems to be interested in doctors who literally have jars of feet on their desk because that's for abortions. There's no reason to keep feet in a jar on desks. But we have abortion doctors doing it, and the president is silence. It's amazing because the silence is deafening coming from the White House on the actual jars of feet that we have evidence of. But there has never been any evidence of American doctors mangling their patients for profit, ever. Then there was the lie that it wasn't a tax, since the president had made this solemn vow.
If you, who make less than $250,000 a year, which includes 98% of small business owners, you will not see your taxes increase one single dime under my plan. Not your payroll taxes, not your income taxes, not your capital gains taxes. Nothing.
Okay, except the cigarette tax and everything else. And then when George Stephanopoulos realized that it was a tax, he vehemently denied it. He lied.
I don't think I'm making it up. Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Tax, a charge usually of money imposed by authority on persons or property for public purposes.
George, the fact that you looked up Merriam's dictionary, that the definition of tax increase indicates to me that you're stretching a little bit right now. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gone to the dictionary to check on the definition.
Well, no.
You know somebody is in trouble when they're trying to make the dictionary the book of black magic spells. Of course they were in trouble because they sent the White House lawyers to the Supreme Court to argue, and listen carefully because this is the actual Supreme Court argument, argue that health care was a tax.
And that's because
that if they don't pay the tax, they violated a federal law.
But as long as they've paid the penalty.
If they've paid the tax, then they're in compliance with the law.
Notice the Supreme Court justice is saying penalty, and the White House attorney is saying tax, as long as they pay the tax. Now, in addition to giving all of these facts during the healthcare debate, we also told you that this was ultimately about the redistribution of wealth. They vehemently denied that, but then when all was said and done, they admitted that. Here is the head of the healthcare.
And that any healthcare funding plan that is just, equitable, civilized, and humane must redistribute wealth from the richer among us to the poor and the less fortunate.
When it gets out of whack, as it did in the 20s and it has now, you need to do some redistribution. This is a form of redistribution.
And because the conservatives that opposed this atrocious plan and others like it, they had to smear them. Because they stood, they had to be knocked down a size. They were smeared to almost a cartoonish extent.
They will be voting to say that women can die on the floor and healthcare providers do not have to intervene if this bill is passed. It's just appalling.
Okay, you would die on the floor. It's ludicrous. But I and people like me are the extremists. Do you remember what they said about death panels? Conspiracy, lunacy, myth.
Conservatives are claiming the White House has secretly set up those mythical death panels that would pull the plug on grandma under Obamacare. If that sounds to you like a snow day snow job, it is.
It is, according to MSNBC. Then they got what they wanted. They jammed it down our throats, and the media helped them. They now admit, okay, yes, death panels are part of this. This is Paul Krugman.
And we're also going to have to we're going to have to make decisions about health care, not pay for health care that has no demonstrated medical benefits. And so, the snarky version I use, which I shouldn't even say to get me in trouble, is death panels and sales taxes is how we do this. But it's not that far in reach.
Okay. Death panels, they do exist. But has anybody called me or Sarah Palin or anybody else to apologize for calling us conspiracy theorists or anything else, all the other bad things they said about us, for alleging that death panels would be part of the health care bill? In fact, they're in the stimulus bill. No, they haven't called us, but they've continued to smear. You see, that's what this administration does. Rather than dealing with the facts and actual audio, they do what they always do.
If you like Glenn Beck and you like Alex Jones, who says we faked the moon landing and that 9/11 was an elaborate hoax and that it was secretly the White House that bombed the Boston Marathon. Michelle Obama was totally in on it. And also there was no massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School. All of those things were hoaxes. They were all faked by the government so we can be enslaved in FEMA concentration camps with the black helicopters and have our organs harvested for the aliens or whatever. If you are one of those folks, if you are a conspiracy theorist who believes in the Glenn Beck, Alex Jones view of the world, well, that doesn't mean you don't need love.
Isn't this amazing? This is amazing. That's the first time I've heard that audio. And I think much of America, too, as MSNBC is falling apart at the seams. But it is amazing to be lumped in with not believing that we went to the moon. I totally believe we went to the moon. 9/11 truthers. I have been on the front line and have received death threat after death threat after
From
death
them,
threat.
because you don't buy it.
Because I not only don't buy it, I have exposed it. I have not even heard the conspiracy theory that the White House bombed the Boston Marathon and that Michelle Obama was in on it. I exposed the fact that the Sandy Hook conspiracy is completely false.
Did a whole show
we
on
did
it.
a whole show on
and
that.
that was despicable. We despise that kind of nonsense.
But again, this is MSNBC doing what Cass Sunstein wrote about. Make sure that you continue to call people conspiracy theorists. Make sure you smear them. And that's what they do. They continue to smear and lie.
Amazing. She's running through a laundry list of things you supposedly believe and can't come up with one thing you actually do.
Yeah, not one thing in that monologue do I
amazing.
believe. In fact, most of that monologue I have debunked. The other part of that monologue I've not even heard. But they just keep on lying because the liars don't care.
He got fired from Fox News, too. But did he curl up into a ball and weep like a baby? Of course he did. This is Glenn Beck we're talking about. But then he saw an open window. The internet. Who needs Fox News when he could take his patented brand of apocalyptic race baiting directly to the fans, who now pay $9.95 a month to hear Glenn. Cheaper than a case of their favorite wine. And boy, I'll tell you, that $9.95 really adds up. Last year, Glenn Beck made $80 million, placing him 11th on the Forbes list of the highest paid celebrities, tied with Elton John, who sang at the wedding of someone else on the list, Rush Limbaugh, who lives in a house that Elton John would call too gay. I mean, who has clouds painted on their ceiling? I'll tell you who, con men. And con men like Rush and Beck are one reason the Republicans are in such dire straits today. Because they don't care about winning elections. They care about separating rubes from their money.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Tell people we're on the brink of disaster, so spend your last couple of dollars on me. That sounds like a winning formula there. No, the winning formula seems to be, at least for political purposes in this country today, lie, smear, and place the blame elsewhere. As long as you're part of the cool club, everyone's doing it nowadays, you know. When Benghazi happened, they got all of that done and more at once, and we'll pick it up there when we come back.